하고 싶어요. 저는 I don't give a shit, I don't give a fuck, I don't care anything. 전 다 신경 안 써. 네가 나한테 뭘 할 수 있는데, 전 이렇지 않아요.
I'm scared. Honestly, I still am. And maybe that's the part people don't want to hear. Maybe when you look at BTS, you see 7 people who have already conquered everything. You see sold-out stadiums, screaming crowds, records, awards, millions of fans. You see confidence, you see success, you see people standing on giant stages like nothing in the world can touch them. But behind all of that, there are still 7 human beings who can get hurt. Welcome to Pop Showroom, where the story goes beyond the headline. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button now because what we're about to uncover is the part most people miss. Trust me, you'll want to stay for this. Now let's get into it. 7 people who can read something cruel online and feel it. 7 people who can have doubts about themselves. 7 people who can wake up on the wrong side of the bed, feel insecure, question themselves, or wonder whether they are good enough. And that reality matters because sometimes the bigger BTS becomes, the easier it is for people to forget the most basic thing about them. They are human beings first. One of the most powerful things about being a fan is feeling connected to an artist.
Like, I know what's going on in my Instagram. I'm not, I can see, but there was no such any purpose or like at least 1% of my heart or intention.
Money does not delete insecurity. Success does not make somebody immune to criticism. And having millions of people cheering for you does not mean you suddenly stop caring when somebody tears you apart. The truth is, you can have an entire stadium screaming your name and still go home wondering if you were good enough that night. You can break records and still have doubts. You can stand in front of thousands of people with a microphone in your hand and still feel vulnerable. That is the part people sometimes forget, and maybe we need to stop forgetting it, because there was a moment when the reality of that vulnerability came through in a way that felt almost painfully honest. There was no giant stage, no dramatic performance, no award sitting in front of them, no polished speech designed to sound perfect, just a simple admission, I'm scared.
군대 전역을 하고 다시 이렇게 모여서 음악 작업도 같이 하고 같이 지내고
We live in a culture where celebrities are often expected to act like superheroes. If they cry, people call them weak. If they complain, people say they should be grateful. If they respond to criticism, people tell them to ignore it. If they make a mistake, suddenly millions of strangers feel entitled to judge every part of their character. It becomes this impossible standard where the artist is expected to entertain everybody but never
그런 것들이 똑같이 있었어요. 똑같이 있었지만 지금 달라진 거는
People sometimes talk about their success as if it happened overnight, like one day they were unknown and the next day the whole world knew their names. But that skips over all the years when they were still trying to figure themselves out. Years when criticism was coming from places they couldn't control. Years when they had to prove themselves over and over again. Years when every mistake could become a headline, every awkward moment could become a meme, and every opinion could be turned into ammunition. Imagine being young, trying to build a career, and knowing that millions of strangers are watching. Now imagine growing older while that audience keeps getting bigger. That pressure doesn't disappear. In some ways, it gets heavier. Because once people decide who they think you are, they start expecting you to remain that person forever. If BTS are happy, people expect them to always be happy. If they are confident, people expect them to never doubt themselves. If they speak honestly, people expect them to always have the perfect answer. If they make a mistake, people act shocked because somehow fame has convinced them that these men are supposed to be flawless. But nobody is flawless. Not BTS, not ARMY, not the people criticizing them, nobody. And that is why the admission that fear still exists is so important. It cuts through the fantasy. It reminds us that underneath the music, the fashion, the cameras, the awards, the headlines, and the massive crowds, there are actual people trying to navigate life just like everybody else. The difference is that their mistakes can be seen by millions. Their bad days can become public conversation. Their private emotions can become fan debates. Their every movement can be analyzed. And sometimes even the love can become overwhelming. That might sound strange because how could being loved by millions possibly be a problem? But imagine never being able to simply exist without somebody watching. Imagine posting something and knowing that within seconds, thousands of people could be analyzing your words. Imagine saying something harmless and watching people argue about what you really meant. Imagine being exhausted and still feeling like you have to smile because people paid to see you. Imagine being hurt and knowing that admitting you are hurt could be interpreted as weakness.
왜 울어?
이러면서 울던데 너.
왜 울어? 슬퍼?
남주 죽었을 때 막아줄 때.
아, 슬퍼서?
Sounds easy, right? Just ignore it. Don't read the comments. Don't let it bother you. Move on. But human beings don't work like that. When somebody says something cruel about you, especially when you know millions of people are seeing it,
무서워요. 저 솔직히 아직도. 저 강한 척을 하고 싶어요. 저는 I don't give a shit. I don't give a fuck. I don't care anything.
sometimes one negative comment can stick longer than 1,000 positive ones. That's not weakness. That's being human. And the important part isn't pretending the hurt doesn't exist. The important part is learning how to keep moving even when it does. That distinction is huge. There is a difference between being unaffected and being resilient. Being unaffected means nothing touches you. Being resilient means something touches you, hurts you, and you still find a way to stand back up. That is what makes this story hit differently. The fear doesn't disappear. The insecurity doesn't magically vanish. The hateful comments don't suddenly stop existing.
I know what's going on in my Instagram. I'm not I can see, but there was no such any
And that is something regular people can understand, because most of us have been there. Maybe somebody laughed at your dream. Maybe somebody told you that you weren't good enough. Maybe somebody embarrassed you in front of other people. Maybe you posted something online and somebody decided to tear you apart for no reason. Maybe somebody you trusted said something that stayed in your head for years. You know that feeling. You know what it's like to pretend you don't care when you actually care a lot. You know what it is like to say, whatever, I don't care what they think, while secretly wondering why their words hurt so badly. That's why this matters beyond BTS, because their story reflects something deeply human.
싸워서 나가는 거야, 나는. 왜냐면 10년 전에도 막 그런 것들이 똑같이 있었어요.
We need to stop confusing strength with emotional numbness. Being strong doesn't mean saying, nothing can hurt me. Sometimes strength sounds more like, yeah, that hurt me, but I'm still here. Sometimes courage isn't standing on a stage without shaking. Sometimes courage is standing on that stage while your hands are shaking and performing anyway. Sometimes confidence isn't believing you're perfect, it's knowing you're imperfect and refusing to let that stop you. And maybe that is one of the most important lessons BTS have given their fans without even realizing it. They have shown people that vulnerability isn't the opposite of strength. Sometimes vulnerability is where strength begins. But then comes another part of this conversation that we seriously need to talk about, the relationship between artists and fans. Because loving someone's music does not mean owning that person. Supporting BTS does not mean having the right to demand access to every part of their lives. Being ARMY it does not mean they can't make mistakes. It does not mean they have to explain every decision. They are allowed to grow. They are allowed to become different people. They are allowed to have boundaries. They are allowed to be tired. They are allowed to disagree. They are allowed to mess up. And yes, they are even allowed to disappoint us sometimes. That's part of treating people like human beings. Think about the people you love in your own life. Your friends aren't perfect. Your family isn't perfect. You aren't perfect. You can love somebody deeply and still recognize that they can make mistakes. So why should BTS be held to a completely different standard? Why do some people expect them to carry the emotional expectations of millions of fans while never having the freedom to be imperfect themselves? That's not love anymore. That's pressure, and pressure can destroy the very thing people claim they are protecting. The irony is almost painful.
영국이 울었잖아.
언제 울었지, 나?
그 캐대언 보면서.
아, 울었지.
아, 나 그 영상 봤어. 그 왜 울어?
이러면서 울던데, 나.
왜 울어? 슬퍼.
남주 죽었을
You
때.
should have done that. Why didn't you post? Why didn't you explain? Why are you wearing that? Why did you choose this? Suddenly, 7 grown men are being treated like characters in a story where everybody else gets to decide what happens next. But BTS are not characters. They don't owe us a perfect storyline. Their lives are not a television show. Their emotions are not content. Their pain is not entertainment. Their mistakes are not opportunities for people to score points against them. And their happiness should not come with conditions.
People, maybe some people would think of me as like, oh no, you still lying. You have that intention and purpose to insult. But
it means understanding that a smile doesn't automatically mean somebody is okay. It means recognizing that public success can exist alongside private insecurity. It means allowing them to have bad days without turning those bad days into a judgment of their entire character. And perhaps most importantly, it means remembering that they don't stop being human just because the world started calling them superstars. There is something almost heartbreaking about realizing that the fear they felt years ago can still exist today. Fame changed the size of the audience, but it didn't necessarily change the heart underneath it. 10 years can pass, careers can explode, millions of people can discover you, your name can become known across continents, you can perform in places you once only dreamed about. But deep down, you can still carry some of the same insecurities you had when you were younger. That's normal. Growth doesn't always mean becoming a completely fearless person. Sometimes growth means learning how to live with the fear without allowing it to make your decisions for you. And when somebody says, in effect, the difference now is that I actually know you exist, that hits hard. Because there is something beautiful about realizing that the support isn't imaginary. The people who believed in you are real. The people who stayed are real. The people who listened to your music during their worst moments are real. The people who found comfort in your words are real. That doesn't erase the hate, but it puts the hate into perspective. For every person screaming something cruel behind a screen, there may be thousands of people quietly rooting for you. For every comment trying to tear you down, there can be an entire community reminding you why you started. And maybe that's what keeps people moving, not the belief that nobody will ever hurt them again, but the knowledge that they are not alone when it happens. That is why ARMY matters in this conversation too. Fandom should not just be about defending BTS from everybody on the internet. It should also be about creating a space where BTS don't have to constantly defend themselves.
아, 진짜 슬픈 노래예요. 멜로디 되게 희망차잖아요. 이게 제가 원래는 가사를 처음에 한글로 다 썼다가 영어로 바꿨는데 뭐 라디오도 있고 이래서 아마 한국어 버전이 있어요. 애들이 다 녹음을 해놨습니다.
It has to include the moments when they are vulnerable. It has to include the times they don't know what to say. It has to include the possibility that they may not always live up to the image people have created in their heads. And here's the part that should really make everybody stop and think. What if the best way to support BTS is not to convince them that they should never be afraid, but what if it's to remind them that they don't have to hide their fear from us? What if they don't have to pretend they are invincible? What if they can simply say, I'm scared, and know that somebody will answer, that's okay, you're still human, keep going. Because at the end of the day, that's what we all need. Not another person telling us to toughen up, not another person telling us to stop caring, not another person telling us that vulnerability is embarrassing. Sometimes we just need somebody to say, I understand, you're allowed to feel this.
다 신경 안 써. 네가 나한테 뭘 할 수 있는데, 전 이렇지
Their
않아요.
performances and their presence, and maybe now the lesson is that they deserve some of that same humanity back. They don't need to be placed on a pedestal so high that nobody can reach them. They need to be seen clearly, not as perfect idols, not as untouchable celebrities, not as 7 men who somehow escaped ordinary human emotions, but as 7 people who have worked incredibly hard, achieved extraordinary things, and still have fears that don't disappear just because the world is watching. The next time somebody posts something hateful, don't automatically turn the situation into another battlefield. And the next time you hear one of them admit that he is scared, don't treat that confession like weakness. Listen to it for what it really is, honesty. Because behind every record is a person, behind every award is a person, behind every sold-out stadium is a person, behind every viral moment is a person, and behind every smile is somebody who still has a heart that can be bruised. BTS don't become less extraordinary because they are human. If anything, that is what makes everything they have accomplished even more remarkable. They were never superheroes. They were people who were scared and kept moving, people who got hurt and kept creating, people who faced doubt and kept stepping onto the stage, people who knew what it felt like to be insecure and still dared to dream bigger.
오랜만에 좀 감상에 빠졌어. 요새 잘 안 그러는데.
You don't have to pretend that hate doesn't hurt. You just have to refuse to let it decide who you become. And if BTS can continue moving forward while carrying all of that, then maybe the least we can do is give them the one thing fame can never guarantee, the freedom to simply be human. I would really appreciate your insights on this matter, so feel free to share your views in the comments. Additionally, remember to like, subscribe, and enable notifications to keep up with this story.